Split you all up into breakout rooms now. We're going to be discussing some of the ideas that we've been talking about here. What we really want you to focus on is what you as individuals can change about your own behavior to try and work against fast fashion, while also thinking about what are the sort of industry pressures that are creating these problems in the first place. The question should have a guide for you here, but there'll be someone from the internal committee in there to kind of keep the conversation going. Shaylin, whenever you're ready, if you could send people out.
Do you want to go back yet?
That should be everybody.
Yeah, everyone's back.
Okay. Just wanted to go over what you guys talked about. We'll start with group 1. I know I stopped by for a little bit, but was there anything that you guys talked about, one question or the other, that you wanted to share with the main group? No? Anyone want to be brave? Take this leap of faith and share what you talked about?
I honestly don't know what group I was in. Is that the group that I was in?
I think
it was? Okay.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize. I wasn't trying to hold out, but we basically, we just talked about, I guess, the different things that in terms of like the policy, what would contribute to some like general ideas in terms of making better policies to reduce, like make the fashion industry more circular. We talked about livable wages and just making sure that the people producing the clothes are kind of like we touched on earlier in the presentation, are able to maintain a healthy life with including the products used to produce the clothes, like the dyes and things, and making sure that they're not toxic, resource efficiency, and like the biodegradability and recyclability of the materials being used, and then just making sure you're reusing your clothes or like passing them down when you're done, or like giving them to thrift shops and things. Not sure if anyone else from our group has anything to add on that.
Adam, I know you started to say something, but do you want to share anything?
I was just gonna say, like, she dropped in, she brought up a great point about greenwashing. Like, companies make it seem as if they're they like go green, they're in support of like environmental policies, even though like they're really not. Like, they just use the term green in their commercials and in their marketing, even though if they haven't done like any actions to back it up. I was also like really surprised, like they're not legally liable. Like, they can just say like, yeah, we're green, and not do anything to prove that, and they're fine. So that was really surprising. Like, I did not know that before, but yeah.
Yeah, that was the one thing I learned a while ago that it's makes you think about how marketing is meant to just show you one side of what they want you to see and what they want you to buy their clothes, even though they're not aligning with your values necessarily. Okay, moving on to sharing group 1. Was there anything that group 2 wanted to add? You guys talked about?
We talked a lot about how technology has kind of affected it, and some of my group members pointed out some really interesting points that advertisement and just generally like online shopping has made it a lot easier to kind of just consume clothing without knowing, more or less, and it's really easy to kind of shop in these brands without really knowing also. But somebody else also pointed out that social media has actually made people more aware of like actually companies which are kind of are good and green and stuff like that. So that was really something really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like all really, really good things. Okay, moving on to group 3. And just want to remind you guys, general members, like please feel free to share. I know all of my internal friends know their stuff, but if there's anyone else from the groups that want to speak up about what they learned in group 3.
I was in group 3.
I guess the only thing like different that we talked about was a little bit about like the geography and how like here living in the United States, it's a very like out of sight, out of mind type of thing because we just go to keep up with fashion and we don't really think about it. And if we think about where we're shopping, it's more of, is something more expensive or is it cheaper, not about where it's coming from. Whereas if you live in one of the countries where like these industry, like where these companies are set up and your children are the people who are going to work there, or you worked there when you were a child, you kind of have a different view when you're not really going to want to spend your money at these companies, but we just don't think about it at all, not really.
Yeah, I think there are some really important concepts you touched upon there. It's a concept called the golden arrow, where as a consumer you really only see the end product. Like you never see any of the arrow past just like seeing it on a shelf, or like even with the last internal meeting we had with food insecurity, we only see the produce in the supermarket. So there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that we're just not aware of. All right, group 4, does anyone want to share from what they talked about? I see a lot of really good points on here in the Google Doc.
I can talk a little bit. So we talked a lot about a lot of the same things that the group so far have mentioned, but we also talked about like the policy aspect of it, and how if one country sort of tightens their labor laws or their environmental laws, then these companies can just pull manufacturing and move somewhere else. And so it really requires like a global effort. And that's something that's really, really difficult and probably is why there's been so little progress on this. And then we also talked about, we talked about the out of sight, out of mind thing a lot, and also just sort of how, now I'm blanking, but yeah, we talked about the geographical aspects of it. And we also talked about like social media and the effect that has had on it, and sort of holding celebrities accountable, but then also like, you know, should we really be like holding celebrities accountable versus governments? And so, yeah, it's a really complicated issue, obviously.
Yeah, like the Kylie Jenner cough there. Thank you for sharing, Sam. And then let's keep moving to group 5.
So our group kind of talked a little bit about like the technology and wealth aspect, and we said like if there are no like sustainable stores in the area, there's like a barrier to accessing sustainable clothing. But like the technology aspect is like online shopping has made it easier to have access to sustainable clothing, but at the same time there are other like extra like costs like shipping. So I'm not sure, like not everybody would have that kind of, depending on your socioeconomic status, not everybody would have that opportunity to afford that. And we also talked about like social media trends that influence people to buy certain pieces of clothing that go like out of style quickly, which like again, like is just like how fast fashion is like promoted. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely, thank you for sharing. I think that social media is such an important part to play in fast fashion and how we shape our ideas around clothing and consumer things, you know? Okay, moving on. Are we on our last group, group 6? You want to share?
I can go. So I thought one interesting thing that our group talked about was like when it comes to like different policies to stop this like fast fashion is having almost like an FDA but for clothing manufacturing. So like making sure that like these manufacturers are ethically sourcing materials and avoiding like child labor and paying like full wages and living wages, and just having companies be more transparent and maybe even like encouraging these companies by giving some kind of incentive for like following those rules.
Yeah, I think there's so much to be said about, you know, again, like going back to like, do we hold governments accountable for this? Do we hold the companies accountable? Like, who should we be telling to pay people living wages? You know, like that's the bottom line. Like, I believe like safe working conditions is a human right, and like getting paid living wages should be a human right as well. But like, I don't know why it's not. You know, just because like companies want to continue to exploit workers. So yeah, and I think this also one more point I know a lot of people have mentioned earlier, just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean it doesn't matter. And I think that goes for a lot of things. And yeah, especially here. I think Jonathan makes a good point in the group chat, links back to the social determinants of health. And I think we can, if anyone else has last thoughts, comments, concerns, things they want to share that they learned, we'll keep going. No? Okay. That's fine too. Here's this little resource slide I made a while ago, actually. And I want to point out this quote from, she was actually a UC professor. Her name's Liz Ricketts from the Oris Present, and her partner, it's one of the last links, the Oris Present. It's kind of, I think it's a nonprofit, and they go and look at where textile waste ends up. And so she has incredible resources. I follow her, and I've learned so much from what she posts on Instagram and her project in general. Her quote says, "We were there to document the destruction caused by a global fashion economy that continues to incentivize overproduction and overconsumption while marketing pseudo solutions." And I think that summarizes what we learned today pretty well, just because we're overproducing, overconsuming, and then we have nowhere to put all this junk. And then it negatively impacts the health and well-being of so many people across the world. So if you're ever interested, there's a lot of different things to look at here. I hope that you use them and you learn something today. So yeah, I think that's it for me.
Thank you,